Which podcast platform is best? Let's research. What podcast platforms are there? What are the most popular platforms for podcasts? What are the best podcast platforms for listening? Which podcast platform is best for beginners or experts, or let's say intermediate? Which podcast platform pays the most? What is a podcast platform? What is the difference between a podcast hosting platform and a podcast listening platform? You see all these questions that I'm asking? I would like you to search for these questions too, so that you can find the answers, and also look within and really ask yourself, what is the main purpose for my podcast? Where is my podcast supposed to be? Who's going to be listening to it? Why are they listening to it? And if they're listening to it, what are they gaining from it? So those are going to be a lot of questions and answers in the loop in between time. But the best thing about this is that you can create a podcast from scratch, and within a week, you would be listened to in uncharted places, untapped zones, places that you probably haven't, let me say it this way, you wouldn't have found those locations if your podcast wasn't an episode reach or a download or a listen or a view, which is a big account for how people can discover you, get to learn more about you. And using either public podcasting or private podcasting, either one would be a great resource for you, because when you have a public podcast, everyone can listen to your podcast anywhere. And most times people ask, what's the best podcast platform for ABC? But you don't really know, because you probably didn't know the difference between the two. So a podcast hosting platform is a podcast platform specifically that you're using to carry your episodes and distribute your episodes through different mediums. So a podcast hosting platform would be, for example, for me, I started off with anchor.fm. That's what it was called before. That's still the RSS feed link URL, the Uniform Resource Locator. But technically now it has been changed from anchor.fm to Spotify for creators. It used to be Spotify for podcasters. Now it's Spotify for creators. So if you go to creators.spotify.com, welcome Carlton. Good morning. Thanks for being here. When you go to these platforms like spotify.com to listen to episodes, the creators.spotify.com section is where, kind of like, think about it like a back door or like a backstage or like a red carpet before you show up on the actual platform. So when you think about creators.spotify.com, that's an extension of spotify.com. So when you're using a free platform like Spotify for creators to create your podcast hosting platform, that is where you can have a great start to learning how your podcast will grow as a business. Welcome, Lucas. And when you build as a business, your goal is to appreciate it. Your goal is to have a place where people can listen to you and have access to your content. Think about a podcast hosting platform like a flash drive, right? Or an external hard drive. It's somewhere where you store, or even let's go a little bit back, just a little bit back. Welcome, Angie and A. Let's just go a little bit back to a floppy disk, right? Now, if you put information in a floppy disk and you insert it into your computer, you're going to get files and folders and images and all the stuff that you have right there. MP3 files, whatever it is, music files. I used to use MP3s. Let me say it this way. I used to use MIDI keyboards with floppy disks when I was producing music, and I still do, but back then I was using at that time floppy disks to save music files when I was recording and when I was producing music with, keyboards like Yamahas. So when I think about a floppy disk and I translate that same concept of storing files, it's the same thing that you see with your podcast, because your podcast has something called an RSS feed. An RSS feed is a really simple syndication feed, And that feed is technically your floppy disk. So everything that you're feeding into, welcome Uptown, everything that you're feeding into that specific floppy disk is coming from a source. So the source is your podcast hosting platform. So if you produce an episode and you want your episode to show up on Spotify or Apple or Amazon or YouTube or iHeart or Pandora or SiriusXM or fill in the blank, welcome Austin, any of these platforms are available for listening, right? They're available as Castbox. There are so many. Even Chrome browser is a listening platform. Siri, Alexa is a listening platform. So when you start looking at the listening platforms available and you're positioning your voice, your show, your link, your website, your content to be on these platforms, it's a great way to build relationship between your podcast hosting and the podcast listening platform. So if you have a podcast hosting platform, like the one I've just mentioned, you can use that to publish your show by distributing your RSS feed to third-party directories. So what does that mean? If you have a podcast show and your podcast show is on creators.spotify.com, now you have a show there, and the moment you hit publish, and most times people don't do this, so I'll say if you're hearing this and you probably haven't checked and you haven't done this, please do, because that would just be a disaster if you haven't done it. So if you haven't, check it out. If you have, great, then you can use that for distribution. As soon as you publish an episode on that platform, you go to your settings, and then in your settings, you're going to see availability. When you click on that, it's going to show you where your podcast is being distributed from or to. So from would be your RSS feed, to would be the destination links. When you now scroll down, you're going to see a section that says RSS distribution. That just means really simple syndication and distribution for your show. So when you click enable, it's going to give you a unique identification number, which is going to be coming in the form of a link. So when I think about RSS feeds, because I also think about this SEO-wise, right? When you look at a sitemap of a website, that's an expandable markup language file, which is an XML. Now, when you look at a podcast, the same type of distribution that algorithms and bots and search engines and systems look for keywords or phrases or links or resources or citations or websites that tag along with the same key phrases within multimedia formats, those are the same type of links, and I'll call them sequences, that appear for a website that would appear the same way for a podcast. So if a website requires a sitemap to submit files and also render content to search algorithms for web scanning and also for web ranking, which is going to bring web performance and web traffic and web leads and web conversions and all the good stuff that we talk about with SEO, it's the same thing with your podcast, because your podcast has about 5-6 buckets, right? There is the podcast name, there is the podcast author, there's the podcast episode, there's a podcast description, there's also a cover art of the podcast, there's an episode cover art, and there's a podcast cover art. So when you start looking at all these components that are all driving back to your show, it's not just about uploading an episode as a podcast host because you have something to push out there. Anytime you upload a podcast episode, think about the file name of your show. Just like when you upload a video on YouTube, you have to also look at the file name of your video link or your video file or your video extension file. If it is, let's say, digitalmarketing.mp4, that's because you're uploading a digital marketing video to YouTube. That's what's going to be scanned and set as a URL. When you go to the library, it's A, B, C, all the way through Z. Now, after the 26 letters of the alphabet, it's now going to be AA, AB, AC. It's going to go to AZ, and then it's going to keep going like that. So when you start realizing that when your keywords, your websites, your links, your questions, your topics are focused on these specific key phrases, it's easier for you to start attracting the right people when it's time for them to find it. Because you don't know when they're going to search for the information that you're providing, but you're creating the opportunity for you to be part of that market share when that happens. So that's the beauty of podcasting, because as a podcast host, when you use a platform and you have that RSS feed now is going to be your ticket to all the other platforms. You're going to submit that to Apple. You're going to submit that to YouTube. You're going to submit that to Amazon. You're going to submit that to Listen Notes. You're going to submit that to Podchaser. You're going to submit that to There's so many out there. There's Pod SEO. There's so many places that you can put. I would say they're countless. They're just countless out there. There's Podmatch. If you want to have interviews, if you want to be a guest on a show, if you want to host and find guests, you can use Podmatch. So there are so many platforms I can tell you about that you can use that would help you get started as a podcast host. So you don't have to spend thousands of dollars to achieve something that you could go on riverside.com and do for free. If you have 2 hours out of 24 hours times 30 in a month, then you can spend 2 hours and record something that you can split into 4 and maybe do 30 minutes a week, which you can now turn into an episode on a weekly basis that turns into a monthly show output, and you can schedule them weeks out in advance. So if you have 8 hours, right, and you're able to put those 8 hours into an algorithm because you've been able to create 4 months worth of content because you have 2 hours worth of information every month, then that's a good way for you to analyze and look at your time and your exchange and value when it comes to your conversations, your topics, right? If I talk about this now, I don't have to talk about this again because I've mentioned it before. And now if somebody's going to ask that question, there's an answer for them. So the answer is here because the question was answered and it was placed on a search algorithm that allows search indexing. And search indexing technically just is another way of saying having access to information that can bridge two entities together. So if you go to google.com and you find a website, it's because that website linked to Google and now you're linked to Google's website's results pages. So it's pretty much a web effect because you're creating this experience for your business. Now, as a podcast host, you can go to other platforms. Welcome, Jay. Welcome, Jason. You can go to other places. You can go to Libsyn, right? That's Liberated Syndication. You can go to that platform. You can go to Buzzsprout, right? You can go to acast.com. These are all websites that you can check out. And you can also just type in best podcast hosting platforms. And there are many out there. Now, I've talked about this before and I mentioned it briefly, but I'll say it again just to make sure that there's context for this information today when you're thinking about podcasts. Now, when you start going into monetization for podcasting, because these days, which is just sad. These days, podcast is not used. It is used for conversation, yes, but I believe more people, more often than not, try to use it for monetization instead of using it for conversation first. And that's where a lot of things change, because if you're going to use your podcast for monetization, thank you, Jason, for that. Appreciate that. 100. when you have a conversation with someone, you don't expect a transaction after that. I mean, that shouldn't happen, right? You should be able to say, okay, this is something that is supposed to happen and it's supposed to create an exchange in value. And that value is going to be given over time. And speaking of time, I just had a call that I'll need to answer when I get off of here because we've been playing phone tag. So I want to make sure that I can respond back. And when you think about the amount of talk time, listen time that you have with people, right? 30 seconds talk time, 30 minutes talk time. We treat time like we have everything, but we don't. Like, only God knows how much time we have, right? So factor time as an asset, and we say, okay, Riverside has 2 hours free a month. Okay, how many hours do I have in a day? 24. If I can do 2 hours out of 24 hours and record within, let's stretch it out to 2 days, right? Maybe an hour for each day, Monday, Tuesday. You still got Wednesday through Sunday to do whatever else you want to do. You've addressed questions that you've answered in form of audio responses. And now that is giving you an anchor to become someone that has thought leadership and contextual demand over time. So that creates a spiral effect on your content because you're able to market to a market share that is interested in your topic of interest, right? That's why there's something called Pinterest. You take off the P, it's interest. So podcasting is not for monetization, it's for conversation. That's how I started. Now, 600 episodes in, I'm still having conversations. Now there's monetization, but that comes after the conversation has been entrusted over time. And that takes time. So if you start a podcast to run ads or to monetize, you're actually better off starting a business than starting a podcast to monetize. Jason, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Welcome to the room and happy Taco Tuesday, everybody.
There's quite a few things. What you were saying earlier, how people look at podcasts, looking like people like myself. I wanted to monetize first or monetize right away or just get to monetizing. But there was like the trial and error of putting episodes out, then relating your social media. And it's like, well, okay, is that a business or a movement? And that's where kind of like what you were talking about reminding me is like the business needs to be funded or forwarded by your works, right? So your podcast is just a verbal discussion to invite people to be interested, period. And I think that a lot of people make podcasts and then create a business at times and then expect to monetize, and they get frustrated when they hit those roadblocks when either people are not downloading or they're not paying. But it's like, where did you connect your audience, like the real business of why you're there for? Okay, you're a strategist, or let's say you're a therapist, or you're doing behavioral help for finding the right kind of employees in your company. But people can't find your business, period, but you're podcasting on subject matters, but people want to look at you. Well, which is your priority, your business, or you just talking? Podcasting it's always been just the conversation where people can get to know what it's all about. And the products or services that you offer are really the main goal. Like, can you get to click and buy, not just be a loyal follower? Like, no offense, but screw followers, because at the end of the day, look at most of your social media or your podcast. How many listens followed by comments, shares, and likes, which gets more exposure, but didn't bring any money in? Like, what happened? There's a big disconnect. So that's me offering my thoughts.
No, I love that. Thank you for highlighting that because, followers these days, I mean, you can get followers, you can buy followers. It's very possible. But what does that mean for you as an expense and a return on investment and an exchange of value over time? That's a question that somebody that is considering that should be analyzing and finalizing. making a decision on something that would make a difference in your business or your bottom line. And that starts off with the why. If I ask some people why they start a podcast, the kind of reasons you hear are going to be, I would say, very expansive, because everyone wants to start for a different reason. Some people just want to get their whole thought out. They just want to use that for therapy, which is something people use podcasts for, by the way. They use it as a therapeutic way of talking through things, and there are people out there who have done that and end up being popular, famous, viral. They become credible, and the people listen to them and they turn that into inspirational stories because it started off with conversation. So podcast is not a place to run ads because you want to get followers or you want to buy people's time, but you're spending those ads so that you can build connections with people and learn more about them. Just yesterday, because right now, everyone is doing their Wrapped, for the year, and I got my Spotify Wrapped for the year, which was very interesting to see. And I got to see the top 5 countries. So shout out to you, all the way from the UK, Canada, Ghana, the US, and Kenya as well. 3 amazing, I would say, points I can mention that spread across these top 5 countries and also the 155 countries plus that are listening as well. Makes me feel like everything that is mentioned matters. And sometimes you may never get the feedback from the person who's listening to you, but the day you do, you'll be grateful that you didn't stop speaking. You didn't stop giving. You didn't stop having conversations with people. Because when I get emails from people who listen to the podcast, the We Don't Play podcast show, and I hear feedback about how the episodes, sometimes for them, it feels like they're listening to, I'm just paraphrasing it, they're listening to stories that change their perspectives as opposed to defining and trying to follow through a script. Because people say that that's what they say, that it's like they're hearing the same thing everywhere. It's like people are reading from the same script. So I go straight into the topic. I go straight into the point, because I know at some point in the conversation, something is going to resonate somewhere. I don't know what, I don't know when, but I know that because I was able to address a topic and provide a solution, then that solution now can be found whenever people are looking for it or searching for it at the time they're looking for this type of topic. Right now it's Christmas, so everybody is in Christmas mode. No one is thinking about starting a podcast. Some people may be thinking about that or considering it for the new year. I know someone who I've been talking to this year. She does amazingly well in her business, in her industry, and I got a message from her, and she wants to start her podcast next year, Q1 2026. And she's been preparing, she's been planning, and she's very serious about it, because that's going to be a way she can now sustain her clients and move away from doing a lot of things to now creating more time for herself. You're buying your time back. So everyone is using a podcast for something specific. You can use it for FAQ pages. You can use it for case studies. You can use it for testimonials. You can use it for storytelling. You can use it for theme topics. You can use it for informational purposes. You can use it for inspirational purposes. So it's really up to you to decide what you want to do with your podcast and how you want to build that going forward. So which podcast platform is best? That answer is really dependent on you, because what could be best today could be best tomorrow. Perfect example, I'm not sure if you guys have heard of this, but I always like to read and research and also see what's going on with the news. I remember when I talked about this in the last time I opened a room about Netflix, acquiring Warner Bros, right? For, I think the bid was about 82 billion. And then all of a sudden, I think it was today or yesterday, I saw Paramount has now outbidded them for about, I think, 108 billion. Don't quote me, check your research. And it's way above what they bidded for. And now it's a bidding war for Warner Bros. So we don't know what's going to happen, but that is currently happening. And why I'm giving you that example is because The other day, it was the best option was Netflix. Now the best option is a different brand or a different, it's Paramount. So you don't know what is best. So when I say this, I'm giving you that very live example so that you're not going to say, oh, this is the best podcast platform. Then tomorrow something else comes out and it's better. And you're like, oh, I wish I knew, I would have waited. No, there's no best. It's what's better for you and what's better for them. That's really the question. If you dice that into two, what's better for you? That's going to be a big question because you have to factor in pricing. Are you going to use a free platform or are you going to pay for a platform? Most times I would tell you, do it free first. Because when you do it free first, you reduce your overhead costs early, super early, that you won't have to worry about, oh, I got to pay $5,000 for this equipment, or I got to get a drone, or I got to get some editing software. Just don't, for the love of God, please do not do that because you will stress yourself out. You would rather open a Clubhouse room, open a Zoom call, go to loom.com, go to riverside.com, go to a platform that you can use and just record. Use your voice memo on your phone and record and say what you got to say in a very quiet place. Start off with audio and address the problem. Answer the question and let somebody hear you, and then they can decide if your question and answer was valid enough for them to make a decision, or they would have to still do some more research because you didn't give them enough resource. So that's going to be on you. But at the end of the day, what's going to be the best for you? Start for free. That's why I gave you Spotify for creators, because that's how I started too. And how did I start? 2019. This is August 12th. I remember I took a whole year from 2018, actually all the way back. If I go all the way back to 2011. 2011 was when I really wanted to, I called it internet radio then, not even podcasting. And I was like, yeah, I want to go into, internet radio, but I didn't know exactly how, but I figured because I was already in the music industry and I knew how to, welcome Katrina, I already knew how to get into music platforms, like let's say platforms, for example, Apple Music or Spotify or Pandora. These are platforms I would easily go into because I would need to use a music distribution platform because I also have entertainment business background experience. I know that with music, for you to listen to your favorite playlist, your favorite song on the radio, your favorite song on your Apple Music playlist or your Spotify music playlist is coming from a source. That's a music distribution source. There are different sources out there. There's TuneCore, there's DistroKid, there's United Masters. There's a lot of them out there. They're independent labels. They're corporate labels. There's a lot you can be able to do. There's also now BMI, ASCAP. This is now when it comes to your royalties. How do you also do Nielsen, which is also a completely different thing when it comes to sound scanning, So when you look at all these reports and all these barcodes and all these, I'll call them abbreviations of codes. These are codes that are going to help you. If you're a book author, right? If you have books out there, you have codes that help you know exactly how your catalog and your inventory works. So when you're looking at all these things, these assets, music, movies for IMDb, you start thinking about all these things. It's not far-fetched. It's right there. So when you think about a podcast platform, don't think that you have to pay X amount of dollars to do this, do that, to get on. You can just go online right now, sign up for free, get your own account, publish your episodes, go live, be consistent. Because the average podcaster doesn't last 8 episodes. Go do your research and you can check it out too. There's a research from Podmatch that they always have every year, or actually every month. So they usually give some statistics on a year-to-year perspective and also a month-to-month perspective. So 8 episodes technically means 2 months because you had 4 episodes each month and at least 1 episode each week. And you have to record, edit, publish, distribute. Record, edit, publish, distribute. You got to do that over and over and over and over again. If you're not ready for that, you might not want to do that because you're like, I'm not making money from this. This is not what I'm supposed to do. Is this really working? You're gonna doubt yourself before you even realize you've just, I would say, doubted yourself more than actually proved yourself and giving yourself a chance to prove a point that you have something to prove. And that is a point you can drive across through an audio device or an audio platform or audio software. So don't spend money on platforms and gadgets and equipment to start a podcast. Start for free. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, Jason, because you put 100 on
Well,
it.
yeah. In the beginning, when I first started out, probably 10 years ago, and I've had different podcasts in the past, I fell for the hook, line, sinker of spending a lot of money on equipment, but I wasn't producing episodes. And then when I started producing episodes, you hit that, you were like, oh fuck, no one's drinking from, or excuse my language, but no one's drinking from the well, right? You offer all this information, but if no one is consuming that information like water from a well, then what do you have? You just have a well. That's it. So to really choose the right platform, what I would tell people now is like, what is the one you can just get good practice on? Good practice, because your episodes in the beginning suck. It's just the way that it is. You know, you learn the quality of your voice, you start learning techniques, you start learning things, and your mind starts getting curious about outcomes. Like, well, I only have like 10 subscribers, or I only have so-and-so, but I really need something that helps me understand my growth, because many podcasters I've known last maybe 1-2 seasons max, and then they just disappear into the often blue whatever sky, and they don't realize that you spent so much money on equipment. And this is how I get my quality equipment for dirt cheap, because I'll see those people, they'll go buy, say like the Rodecaster 2, or they'll go buy an SM7B and spend $400, but no one wants to buy it. And then I pick it up for $150, and I'm like, hey, my gain, your loss. But it's like, people don't realize, like, if you listen to too many people who don't do often, then the money you spend is wasted, like on tech that you don't understand. So for software, the ones I like, very easy to use. I liked Buzzsprout. I liked RSS.com. And there was another platform that I used to use, and Podbeam, I think that's called. I found those very useful, but it was like the way that the use would make it easier for me just to go record and upload. Now they offered features, they offered features where you can edit and add sound and song to certain parts or breaks. But what I learned about podcasting is try to limit the recording to no more than 20 minutes, and then just create another episode. It's just that simple, you know? And then when you get better and you understand, well, this is what I like about my episodes, and this is how I can clean up. Maybe there's too much noise in the background. Maybe the noise is actually adequate. The background noise in me in the street is adequate for the episode. You're learning all kinds of different facets. You're the producer. And I think that doesn't cross people's minds, that they're going to have to be the producer, and they spend so much money on apps like, say, like Descript. Love Descript. But if you asked anyone who's used Descript, is that you're going to spend a lot of time learning and practicing. Well, to the average podcaster, that doesn't make sense, because they're going to hit roadblocks, because all the features that they have is being hung up because they don't know how to use the features. Instead of just like, well, why are you recording? Are you recording because you want this, or because you feel like people would be interested? I create my content because I want to do it. I'm interested in it. Everyone else who follows them thereafter is a bonus. And I learned that from Rick Rubin's book, The Creative Act. I really like that he's been successful in business because he invested in the things that he was interested, not what the public was interested. That was a game changer. So I'll stop there.
Thank you, Jason. That is very helpful and thoughtful because you mentioned a lot of things that are very important to take in, especially when you look at the time and investment in these things that you're giving to people when it comes to how you're spending relationships with them. Because I'm sure, like for you, relationships that you built 10 years ago, you still have those relationships now because of one conversation or one episode or one topic that resonated with them. And that just turned into the fact that you both like pizza, or you both like something that is great, or you both like something specific that is going to give you even a softer entrance into that relationship build, and that also entrusts something over time. And not just because of the topic, but because it was given and received in a way that the exchange was valued and perceived in a high, I can call it mentality score. Because when you're doing these kind of things, you have to also consider the person listening and what they're listening to. That's why you're also very careful with what you say, because you don't want what you say to come back at you, because you want to make sure that you're saying things that are of truth and of goodwill and of things that you can actually, stand your ground on and, work back to and also build from. So definitely that is so exciting that you mentioned that. And I did some calculations and I put the link in the chat because I always love to give you references. I always do. Go to podmatch.com/report. Go to podmatch.com/report. I put the link in the chat and click that link and you're going to see what I'm about to say as well. Very important things to note. Right now in the world, here's the problem. And you can solve that problem if you decide to just be consistent. On average, and this is what they say, which is very interesting. On average, it takes 2 years and 100 episodes. Think about that. It takes, on average, 2 years and 100 episodes released, not recorded, not edited, but released. And released in a way that is showing up on multiple distribution platforms when it comes to podcasting. So if you're thinking about, let's say, a podcast platforms list, one of the podcast platforms list you can go to is pod.link, pod.link, pod.link. When you search any podcast anywhere, whatever topic, or just search for the episode or the podcast show you want to look at, and it's going to give you all the platforms that your podcast could be on. So if it's not on any of those platforms, go back to Google or go to your chat GPT, wherever you search, go to Siri, go to Alexa, and ask for the submission link or the RSS feed submission link for those platforms. It's very easy to do. It's just that it's going to be a little bit tedious because you'd have to do a lot of authentication. Why? Because everything that you're going to do is going to stem back. This is why SEO is important, back to your email. Because when you authenticate your email address and you now go to a third-party platform, let's say like Apple, you have to sign in with your iCloud, or you have to sign in with an email address connected to your Apple device so that you can now submit your RSS feed for Apple Podcasts. That's going to happen with iHeartRadio or Amazon. You have to sign in with your Amazon account. It's an email. So when you start signing in with these accounts and you're creating a loop, don't use different email addresses, because when you use the same email address and you're now submitting, let's say, to Listen Notes is going to send an authentication code to your primary RSS feed link, which is attached to an email address. And that email address is going to be technically created based on activity, because that's what you're submitting to different shows. So when you start thinking about like Podlink and all these platforms like we talked about earlier, when your website is connected to all these platforms because you're using a podcast hosting that has access to all this information, then what you're going to do is you're having a deeper root in the search algorithm because you're creating more extensions per episode. So for every episode that you extend, I love how you said 20 minutes and under, Jason, because that's a sweet spot. So that's a drive. Somebody can be taking a walk. Somebody could be walking their dog. Somebody could be listening to music. They could be doing like a sprint, or they could be on a treadmill or a Stairmaster. They could be eating food or preparing food, or they could be doing laundry. They could be somewhere. They could be doing something, because people listen to podcasts when they're active. The top 3 places people listen to podcasts: The top three places that people listen to podcasts is one, when they're getting ready, two, when they're in motion or when they're driving, when they're in the park or when they're doing something active, when they're walking, three, when they're in the gym. So if they're in these places that have activity going on, that means their mind is also working at a high capacity, right? When you wake up in the morning, that's when you're alert, right? So when you start thinking about somebody's getting ready for 15 minutes and you have a 10-minute episode and you've given them 5 minutes back because they have to get out of the house in 15 minutes, you've been able to build that relationship with them. How will you know? Because at the end of the year, you're going to get a wrapped or I'll call it a roundup for your podcast. And they'll tell you what people listen to, what music they like, what artists, and that also tells you ideally what kind of things people like to do, especially when it comes to watch time and reading time and screen time. So if someone is spending 2 hours listening to your content in a month, that's a good thing, because those 2 hours they're investing a month could turn into 10 hours in 5 months. And now those 10 hours turn into a conversation that could help you for the next 10 years. So you just don't know what's going to happen. So that's why it's really good to put out this information at the very time that you can do it. So go ahead, Jason.
I'd like to add something. I don't think it's really mentioned, and you have qualified experience in a lot of different areas for the podcasting. But would you encourage your listeners when they're selecting their platform to think about, like, maybe map out your stages of your podcasting career, which people don't talk about? I think that a lot of people just jump into recording, and then when they don't get a response, or they're trying to equate it to qualified ears who will consume it, is that, what I would tell beginning, intermediate, and even advanced is look at stages. Look, if I were to tell people who are getting into podcasting for business, is look at stages. Like, if I tell you 20 minutes max, it's for a reason, because it is, most people are not going to listen, or I shouldn't say most people, many people don't listen past 20 minutes. Like that, it's just like dead air. Like looking at Joe Rogan, his episodes go for 3 hours. So what does he depend on? He depends on his staff to divide segments into sometimes 3 minutes, 1 minute, 90 seconds, 30 seconds to go people look at an episode. But what happens is if it can't be broken up, then it's like, I watched a lot of crap that guys are either getting high and I just don't understand. So to me, when you're selecting a platform, is the platform going to allow you to grow with it? Some don't offer those advanced features. People get mystified on advanced things, but if you're still in the kindergarten and you expect to play in high school, you've got a long way to go, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think that people need to look at, like, what are the stages of podcasting? What does a successful business podcast look like from a hobbyist? Like, where can we work progressively into that level of, like, where you want to be? Because if you don't have the vision for the business, then whatever you're going to do in podcasting isn't going to matter, because you don't have the destination in mind and what it looks like. Because I find a lot of people don't listen to podcasts. They want to make them, but they don't listen to them. Well, I'll give you an example. I'm listening to a creator named Ryan M. Dunlap. He has this podcast called Conflicted. She's a strategist. He's a former hostage negotiator, right? What drew me to him was I saw his TikTok posts, and I didn't buy his book. I didn't buy anything, but I started listening to where his segments came from, and they were no longer than 20 minutes. It was easy, compact. I was getting my coffee, getting on the drive, or I have a dead spot in my work. I can listen. You don't know where your listener's going to come from. So when we look at this, like, what's the best platform for you or for anyone, is to look at how you can stage it for your growth. I believe that would be a great contribution.
Oh, yes, definitely. Especially for the growth part, because you got me thinking about, like, seeds, plants. When you're watering plants, and that plants would need, basic elements for growth, for germination. And you start thinking about it like the way you said, I would just equate that really to podcast distribution platforms. If your podcast is only available, let's just have a case study here. Let's say person A has a podcast, person B has a podcast as well, but person A has distributed their 10 episodes in the last 10 months because they published one episode a month, and they've published it across one platform, maybe Spotify or YouTube, right? That could happen, right? That person A could actually be somebody who has just said, I'll just do one a month and that's it, and I'll keep it on YouTube because that's what they understand distribution or networking or building a podcast would look like. That's fine. That's just one of many. Now, person B has 10 episodes as well in the last 10 months, but person B decided to not only be on YouTube, but now submitted an RSS feed that went beyond YouTube or beyond Spotify, for either of them. But now person B has submitted their RSS feed to at least, let's say, 20 podcast hosting platforms that would actually be good for distributional purposes. In other words, there are 20 podcast servers, if I use a technical term, but if I use just the basic term, you've submitted to 20 podcast websites that have their own communities, that have their own domain authorities, that have their own backlinks, that have their own branding, they have their own audience, they have their own market, right? And you've submitted your podcast show to Apple. So now everyone that has an Apple device, from whichever iPhone you use to the current one, iPhone 17, anyone that has an Apple iPhone or at least has an Apple device, whether it's an iMac or let's say an Apple Watch as well, that too, it could be your Apple iPhone, it could be your tablet. Anyone that has an Apple device can reach and click on Apple Podcasts and search for something that you talked about, and now they can listen to your episode because they have access to a device that you signed up for, that you connected to. So if person B has 20 destinations, 10 episodes in 10 months, and person A has one distribution with 10 episodes in 10 months, which one out of the two would have a higher percentage or a higher probability of getting more attention or more reach or even more downloads, to the point where they can actually show up more on search engines to now increase their web activity? Which one out of the two would you see? I'm sure it would be B, because B has more and B has a wider scope. Just like if you distribute your product and you have 20 stores, okay, you got 20 stores. If your competitor has 20 states that they're distributing across 20 different stores within each state out of the 20, that's distribution. So when you take that type of analogy and bring it back to your podcast and say that if I have a podcast, at least let my podcast be on at least 5 platforms accessibly. Because if you don't have a podcast that is accessible, then you don't really have a podcast. You have, I don't know what to call it, but I would call it a draft, because it's not something that is accessible. Because what do you call a draft? If you don't publish it, it's not out there, right? But if you publish it, great, it's out there, but it's really a draft, quote unquote, because you're not giving people access to finding it. That's really what a draft is. A draft is still far from published, right? But even if it's published and it's not published and distributed, I could call it drafted, because you're still, think about like NBA draft picks. Like if you use the same words and just really think about it and ask yourself, am I distributing at a large capacity? Am I distributing within a network that is giving me more access to more people, more reach, more destinations? Yes. Because if you start distributing your platform to different platforms, let's say your platform is Anchor or Spotify for creators, and then you're submitting to other platforms like Spotify, like Apple like iHeart, like Pandora, like Listen Notes, and all these platforms are receiving your podcast, eventually the people that listen to those podcasts on those platforms will start listening to you. And I found it very interesting. There's someone that I connected with on LinkedIn. She lives in the UK, but she was on her way to Spain because she was looking for a podcast episode. She told me this. Shout out to her because she listens to this too. And she told me on LinkedIn that, and now we're really good friends. She told me that she had a client that was in Spain looking for ideas from Pinterest and trying to understand how Pinterest works so that the fashion designer that was in Spain can use Pinterest as a way to get the right information out of the context to be able to create the experience they were looking for. And from that conversation, she told me that she listened to me from Castbox. And that is really out of this world. Nobody really says I listen to you on Castbox. I know some people listen on Downcast. Some people listen on other platforms that are very unconventional, quote unquote, because not everyone listens to those platforms majorly, but those are platforms that are accessible. And that's where people have their listening time, because podcasting is more like a private connection with someone, or I can even call it a personal connection with someone, because you're hearing their voice. You're connecting with them, compared to YouTube, where you just have to click play and swipe all day. So there's a big difference between those two. And when you get those types of messages from people who tell you real stuff like that, you really think about the type of things that you say. And if the topics resonate with people who you don't even know, how much people who are not telling you about the things they're discovering, which is way more than the people who are telling you. So that sample size should tell you a lot from the little that you're getting to know. Yes, Jason.
Oh, hold on 1 second. 1 second.
As we're waiting for Jason, go ahead.
In the background, and I didn't want to interrupt when you asked. Do you ever think that, or this is what I observe, I think people choose the wrong podcasting platform based on too much like social media consumption. Like they're not thinking about, maybe they choose something that's too advanced for themselves, and they don't understand all the tools that the marketing comes with when they're choosing the platform based on what they learned from social media, like say like TikTok or Instagram or Facebook, and they found, oh, this person's on Facebook all the time and they're making great material. I love watching them. But when you come to distribution, like you kind of said, it made me think, like, I think there's a lot of people that get false impressions on the platforms because they learned from social media that it was supposed to be that easy. What are your thoughts about that? You know, are people learning from the wrong place of social media instead of looking at the platform that they want to produce and record first?
Ooh, that's a good question, Jason. Yeah, I definitely, the metrics are being read from a different scope. And I'll give a very prime example. When somebody has a podcast, and let's say your podcast is, let's say you have 1 million likes on TikTok because you said something on a podcast and the video went viral, that would be a metric for someone to say, oh yeah, my podcast is popping. My podcast is being listened to. My podcast is great. People know my podcast. Yes, they know your podcast. But if I ask that same question a year from now to the people who listen to you, would they be listeners? Would they be fans? Would they be subscribers? Would they be email connectors? Would they be people that you actually work with, people that you connect with? That answer is going to change drastically. So when people use social media to gauge or to determine the success of their podcast, it's great. You can do that because that's also distribution. That's social media distribution for your podcast, which is valid and is very good for community. It's good for building trust. It's good for building engagement. It's great. But if you keep doing this is where the caveat is. If you keep releasing episodes and you keep doing the same thing on TikTok, on Instagram, and you start pushing out content like that socially, great. But your podcast is not even distributed on the back end to third-party destinations, then what you're doing is you're creating more blockages in the way. This is what I mean. If person A watches your TikTok and says, oh, I love your podcast, let me go and check if it's on Apple, and it's not an Apple podcast where they listen to your show or where they listen to people's shows, and your show is not part of that That's a problem. If somebody listens to Pandora,
That's a huge thing. Oh my God, that's so huge. Because do you remember when creator programs started for Spotify and people were getting pissed like, oh, well, it's not showing up on Apple Podcasts? No, because it's exclusive to Spotify's creator program. And they didn't realize that wasn't getting distributed because they missed a major step in registering your podcasts around the globe. That was huge right there. What you just said a moment ago.
yes, Jason. I'm thinking about it is very important. And Janae, thank you for that question. I'm going to definitely come to that for sure. That's a very good question. The whole idea of creating a podcast is so that you can extend the conversation beyond yourself. That's what I see podcasting for, because I've been podcasting for 6 years, going to 6 years in August next year, God willing. And I've seen in the first 5 years how it's taken off. And it was simply conversation. Thank you for the 100, Janae. Simply conversation, all 100% free till today. My podcast, I don't charge guests. I don't charge, whatever price that is for guests. I don't have a buy me a coffee. I don't have those things for that reason, specifically because I don't want it to feel transactional. That's not my goal. Is to build genuine conversations. And when I get feedback from people, thank you for the 100, Janae. When I see people respond back through email, through social media, through LinkedIn, they send me voice messages, they connect and they say, hey, I listened to this and this happened. That makes me feel like, okay, I drove the point home and someone somewhere understood what I said, because that's the goal. If someone's not understanding what you're saying, then who are you really talking to? And you don't want to be talking to yourself, because you already are. And that's not the goal. The goal is to communicate, and it's a two-way conversation. And podcasting, most times people think it's a one-way conversation because you think you're talking to yourself, but someone that's listening to you is actually processing what you're saying and talking back to themselves. So they're creating conversations out of your conversations. So when you start creating conversations for people to think about, then there's a big change in how people are able to find your confirmation based on what you say, either by affirmation, either by representation, either by information, whatever type of topic you're going to talk about. Someone's going to listen to it and they're going to feed back into what you say by searching for it on the other side of their, I'll call it their ecosystem. Because if someone's listening to your show on TikTok and they can't find you on Apple, that's a lost opportunity. And that's a big problem. So before you start going to TikTok and start saying, hey, check me out, or going to Instagram and saying, listen to my podcast, get your house in order. You don't have an open house with real estate and tell people, hey, open house, and the door is closed. You don't, that's just not good for your branding. Yes, Jason.
I was
And we're
just going to
coming to you,
add
Jimmy.
to Janae's question. It's like, okay, it's like when you introduce yourself or you come across a friend, how's it going? I don't like being asked, how's it going? But if you're giving something directly, someone to be reinterested, let's say Janae's been off podcasting for 4 years and wants to get back into it now. Well, what did you do back then where you stopped? Or what fed you to do a podcast then where you stopped? And is it the same reason now? So if you're looking at like what you created then, is it going to be the same thing? Or you had some time to think and kind of mature and grow through the issues and come back to be able to giving a pitch and a hook? Because to me, I don't get interested in podcasts unless I'm hooked, like watching, say, like streaming videos, like you're watching your favorite show and they leave a cliffhanger. If you don't left a hook for people to be interested specifically for what you just made, why would they be curious about the next time? They are fed, they walk away and they go to somewhere else. Keeping people interested is hooking them at the end so that they will stay to tune into what is next, what's in their interests. So I wanted to add that, so think about, Janae, are you going to recreate what you already did before? Or maybe you had some time to kind of learn and go forward. And it's like, I have a new spin on some things that I covered, and I'm looking forward to making new content in a simpler way where it's not so complicated. That's the point.
That is true. That is so true. I appreciate you, Jason, for saying that, because it's a mental thing. You have to really think about the people you're connecting with, because episodes that you recorded years ago could still listen to. Let me say it this way: they could be listened to years after you recorded them, and people may not listen to that exact episode when you want them to, but when they need to and it's available, they'll be the first people to show up. That's what usually happens. And Janae, you're so right on this when it comes to, creating that intimacy between you and the person that you're connecting with, because podcasting really goes directly to the soul. Like, it really is a connection based medium, because when people are listening to you, they're listening to you when they're active. When you think about activity and you think about being active, there are a lot of things you can do when you're active, right? Whether it's sports, whether it's romance, whether it is whatever it is, right? There's going to be a resonance of energy that's going to be given. So when you're either giving people music to listen to, or a background, or a sound effect, or a conversation, there's going to be something that's going to happen that's going to let them know that, okay, I'm active, I'm doing these things, but let me also do it while doing this, right? Some people are able to do that and use both. People listen to jazz music when they're working. Some people listen to classic music, or classical music, or Baroque music, or whatever it is that you listen to, or, R&B, whatever it is that your vibe is, you're going to listen to something that's going to give you that feeling. Afrobeat, whatever it is, rock. Yesterday, I was looking at 5 different artists that my audience listens to. There's Drake there's K Strings, there's Moses Bliss, there is a Spanish duo. I've never heard of them before. There's Bad Bunny. So I'm like, wow, there are a lot of artists that my listeners are listening to that I'm getting feedback from. Why? Because I also put music in the background of my episodes. I create jingles for podcasters. I already created 2 instrumentals for a new show that just went out. Shout out to Lunch with Leaders podcast. They're about to, take off as well. We're going to do the distribution for them very soon. And that's going to just kick off on its own. And there are other podcasters that are doing amazingly well. They are business owners, they're professionals, they're living in their world, and they're dominating in their industry, and they're using podcasting as a way to extend their information, because not everybody reads. Think about it. The attention span of somebody these days is so small. So for someone to listen to you for an hour, 2 hours, like you're saying, Jason, with Joe Rogan, it's going to be hard. But those 30 seconds, those 10 seconds, that one clip, that one frame, that one video, that one audio clip, that one audiogram can change everything. And people just need to keep listening to that. But when you think about social media as a metric, don't use social media as a metric to validate how people are listening to you. Look at it first from where your extensions start from. If you have submitted to 40 different podcast directories, that means you have 40 different websites that you could be pinging from. And what happens? Those 40 websites have 40, I can say, transactions beyond you. In other words, if, let's say, just to give you a random example, I'll give this example. Let's say I submitted my podcast to Listen Notes. And now, because Listen Notes has partnered with Apple, because you can submit your Apple RSS feed link, or rather your Apple podcast link, or you can submit your RSS feed link, Spotify is not part of that list. So if I'm not on Apple, I can't submit it that way, because this company has partnered with that company. So in other words, I'm strengthening my domain. I'm strengthening my inner circle. I'm strengthening my feedback loops. I'm strengthening my signal strength, if I can say it like that, because anytime you connect to another website or publish your site within another domain, you're accessing more, I would say, more community baselines, because you're able to extend from just your own show to other shows. If you submit your show to a radio station or to a TV show or to a network, you're expanding your network, because you're getting more from a community that is still tapped into the same resource. So when you think about your podcast and you expand it as a podcast platform, start for free. Start on Anchor.fm or Spotify for creators, which is the same thing. And then you're able to scale it out from there too. So this is big. This is really, really big to, consider this. And Janae, you asked about, because you're curious on how to get back into it once you've taken a hiatus. Honestly, the best way to start or to continue is to just pick it up from where you stopped and continue. Why? Think about your podcast like credit. I won't stay on this for too long, but I want to make sure that I can drive this point home. Think about your podcast like credit. If you have credit that you have up to X amount, and you know that you can use this, and last time you used this credit, let's say you used this credit card last time was last year, right? Okay, you last used it last year, and now you still have access to it. You haven't lost it, you haven't closed it, it's still accessible. It may be dormant, quote unquote, but it's still accessible. That's your podcast. Because if someone listens to your podcast today and they look at your last released episode, which was, let's say a year ago, they're not going to say, oh, you had an episode a year ago, is she going to do that again? No, they're focusing on what you have right now on the table, which is why they are showing up in the first place. So when you now create more episodes and you see them coming back, that's because they now want to listen to you even more. I feel like they would say that too. Right. Exactly. So you're bringing up those conversations and say, hey guys, and honestly, like you talked about intimacy, I would be straight up. I'll do an episode and say, hey y'all, I was away for a while. This was going on. I'm back. Hope you're well. Merry Christmas. Like you're bringing it back in, not because you're forcing an episode in their ears, but you want them to know that, hey, I was thinking about you while I was away. And that changes everything about the conversation to begin with. So using a podcast as an extension like that, thank you for that 100. So I'm glad that it made sense. When you think about it like credits, when you think about it like a gain, you're able to still spend that time with them because you once spent it before. And because now it's no longer a transaction, it's a response, you're able to now respond back to them based on how they've been feeding back into you. So absolutely. Okay. Yeah. I'm glad it caught that way for you, because when you think about podcasting, it's not hard. It's just a matter of understanding where people are, where they need to go, and how you're able to do it and create that extension. Welcome, Coffee and Chris. So you build your podcast based on conversation. The more you're able to release your episodes, the better it is for you. There's something called a cadence, right? On podcasting or with podcasting. That cadence means for every number of days in the week, there's a number of times that you release an episode. So some people release every day. Some people release every 2 days. Some people release every 5 days. Some people release every 15 days. Some people release every 30 days. So that cadence is going to be like a windmill. So if you think about a windmill, if that blade is moving faster and faster and faster, it's creating wind, right? So that wind is creating an effect. So if you use that same analogy and say that if I drop 30 episodes within a 30-day calendar month, and now in these 30 days, I have one episode that's at least 1 minute long, I have 30 minutes of talk time. Think about that. 30 minutes of talk time out of a 30-day month calendar, right? And in those 30 minutes, you've dropped 1 minute of nuggets that still link back to your website, that still link back to your previous episode or the one that's coming, or you turn it into a series, however you want to build it. And that way you can still extend that over to them. It doesn't have to be a 20-minute episode or a 50-minute episode. Those are for the reasons of building trust. That's why Jason was talking about that. Those build trust, because if I spend 20 minutes with you on a phone call or on a Zoom call, that's enough information for me to decide what to do next. So if you treat it like that and build it that way, it's going to be easier than trying to start a new episode and try to figure out, oh, how does this work? How does this work? How does this work? Should I say something? Should I not say something? It just eases the stress out completely. And Janae, you said it was easy for me to release every week while using Anchor. Yes, it was user friendly. Now I feel like I need to find one similar. You're welcome. Yeah, it's definitely a great way to start, and you can still use Anchor as long as you distribute your RSS feed to the multiple platforms. Then you can start to build trust and also build attention and retention with your podcast, because there are very different types, right? There are IAB types of podcasts. In other words, IAB, for those who don't know what that is, IAB, right, is called Interactive Advertising Bureau. Just like we have a Forex Bureau, we have an Interactive Advertising Bureau. Welcome, Bo. We have an interactive advertising bureau. So that means that your podcast could be certified or may not be certified. There's a website that talks about this. I love research, so I'm going to give you all the research that I got, and we're talking about research today. Thank God for Apple devices. I can literally just put the link here in the chat because I can copy it to the clipboard. So here we go. So I have it in my chat. Hello, Bo. What's going on? Happy December. Thanks for being here. I've put the link in the chat. Boom. All right. So that link is what I'm looking at right now. And you can check it out and you can see all the platforms. There's a section that says podcast compliance, right? When you open that link, under podcast compliance, you're going to see all the platforms that have last been certified when it comes to advertising. And what does this really mean? It just means that when you have a platform and this platform is IAB certified, it means that your show allows advertisers to place ad slots on your podcast before your show starts. I'm sure you've probably listened to an episode where someone listens to your show, but before the show starts, they're listening to an episode from Disney or from MasterCard or from your favorite furniture or from a sports store or from somewhere that is related to how you search. That happens. It's the same way it happens on your YouTube, on your Netflix, right? It's the same way it happens on your podcast because it's coming from a bureau, right? And that's where exchange is done. So if you're hosting your podcast on a platform that is compliant, right? That's another way of building your business because you're able to have compliance with people and softwares and companies and people. You don't have to go through processes over and over again because you've already done your pre-checklist. You've been able to do everything and you've been able to get everything down pat. Now, the next thing is for you to now put your content out there so that if somebody is talking about food and let's say they're advertising spices, just because you had a topic about gut health or you had a topic about, nutrition, now that episode becomes a trigger or becomes a signal for that food company to advertise on your podcast show. You don't decide. Some platforms allow you to choose. Some platforms don't allow you to choose, right? I've talked about this before. So when you start choosing platforms and podcast hosting sites to create these things, it helps. Diary of a CEO, right? They're on a specific platform. Joe Rogan, he's on a specific platform. There are ways you can tell which platforms they are on because these are all podcast distribution sites that is accessible to everyone. Some of them could be large enterprise. Some of them could be free. Some of them would require some training. Some people would, you can maybe do third-party platform distribution. It depends on how you set it up. For me, I've always learned, and I'm self-taught. I'm left-handed. I've taught myself how to play the drums, how to swim, how to cook, how to podcast, how to SEO, how to do this, and running a business now 12 years in. Now I have a podcast 6 years in, and I'm still learning. I'm still growing. I'm still understanding things. I'm still connecting with people, so it allows me to still have that opportunity to scale because you want to get better. You want to be better than you were. Where at the end of the year, when was the last time you did something new for the first time? So when you start creating those moments and start building those responsibilities, you're able to also allow yourself to understand where you are and where you need to be. That's why I'm giving you these links. When you go to iabtechlab.com, this is a website you can go to, iabtechlab.com/compliance-programs/compliant-companies. You can do that. If you need to, you can go to the website and check it out for yourself and see what I'm referring to. So these are websites that you can check out and see if you want to be on there. And I talked about it myself. I moved from Spotify to Amazon. So now I'm on Amazon's network. And now anytime you listen to my podcast episode, you will hear a couple of advertisements before it starts. And most times people say it's not going to reduce your listeners. It's not going to slow down your traffic. It's not going to da-da-da-da-da-da. Those are all subjective answers or subjective thoughts. Until you do it, until you test it, until you try it, don't knock it till you try it. So I did that and it's actually flipped the switch because now people actually want to listen to it more because they're getting ads of their choice and they're listening to brands that are able to connect with them at a larger base. So now because I'm within the Amazon network, I'm able to choose which brands I can approve or decline to be on my show. So it gives me different categories, and I can say, okay, I don't want to have this type of, topics. I don't want to have this types of, whatever it is. I can choose what that looks like. Some platforms you can't choose. Yes, you can run ads and they'll run ads on your show, but they may not be able to allow you to choose. So for me, a big thing is choice, time, value, exchange. Those things are big to me. So I'm not just going to use a platform because they're running ads. I want to make sure that the ads that are running are suitable for my audience. So the same way you take care of your body, you take care of your mind, you take care of your soul, you take care of your spirit, you take care of things that are belonging to you. It's the same way you take care of other people, because how you want people to take care of you is how you take care of yourself first. So that's why I was very specific, and I prayed about it. I manifested. I said, yeah, this is what I'm going to do. And now I would say since July till now, I'm now with Amazon's network, and it's been doing amazingly well. So I'm coming here to tell you that it's possible. I started for free for about 5 years, switched over in my 6th year. And now I'm still going to connect with people, and I still manage accounts, and we're able to scale podcast shows. If you have a podcast show, click the link above and sign up. Click the link in the description, sign up and get emails so that you can get connected with me. I always send at least 2 emails a month. I don't even go over that depending on what the occasion is, but I make them very little, but also very heavy, because when I send you one email, that email could last you 2 weeks, because the information in there is enough for you to keep you consistent in what you're playing or what you're trying to get at for the month. So it's very exciting to see where all people have been able to really connect, and it just creates more and more over time. Bo says, what's the overall benefit for allowing these ads on your podcast? And Bo also says, are they paying you as well for promoting their ads? Great question. Yes, they are. They are. Because when you start having a podcast show that starts attracting those types of advertisements, what starts happening, there's a pool. Let me explain it this way. If, for example, Shopify, I won't mention the price, but they're in the millions to hundreds of millions when it comes to spend on podcast shows. So if they decide to put X amount of dollars into podcasting, and that's the budget, now all the shows that are talking about SEO, websites, building, web infrastructure, architecture, whatever it is that is going to be web related to their brand, is where that bureau I talked about, the Interactive Advertising Bureau, the IAB, because they are certified by podcast hosting rights, and they're also compliant, that advertisement can now come through my podcast show, because a percentage of that budget has been allocated to my show, because my audience has interest in what I talk about, which is in relation to the brand that is advertising on my network. So when they're running ads, we don't control, they do control what types of budgets they have, right? But when you now get your payouts, it's because of your episodes. So let's say I dropped 30 episodes this month. And in this month, I had at least 3 slots. Every time before the show starts, you hear 3 different ads from 3 different companies, 3 different times, every episode for 30 days straight. Now, within those episodes, I'm increasing in downloads. I'm increasing in listen scores. I'm increasing in trust scores. I'm increasing in engagement, and I'm also increasing in brand awareness. So if I've been listened to for 30 days straight, and the people who are listening to these episodes have been listening to these ads as well, meaning that they've finished the ads, just like on YouTube, if you skip the ad, then it's not really paid, quote unquote, because you have to finish the ad for the bid to be complete when it comes to advertising. So it's the same thing with your podcast. If I say I'm going to have 60-second slots for 3 different brands, then I know this 60 by 3 is 180. I know that 180 seconds is slotted specifically for these specific brands. So if that happens 30 times, then I know by the end of the month, these 30 brands plus that would have been on my show, let's say 3 by 10, that's 30. And now these 30 brands, if they are all different brands, let's say there were 30 different businesses at 3 different occasions that were running ads each episode per run. Now, all those brands are all going to have a percentage cut that's going to be paid back into the advertiser that came from the show. So all of them would say, okay, this is 20 cents, this is $20, this is $200, this is $2,000, whatever the price is, because you have, let's say, 1,000 downloads. Now, because of those 1,000 downloads, people were able to listen to it, and one download equals to 60 seconds, for example. So if you have one download that equals to 60 seconds and you have 1,000 downloads, and you now do the math based on the CPM, the cost per mil, now the advertisers bid. When you now get your cash, when you get your payout based on that monetization value, it's basically based on the topics of interest that drove those brands to advertise with you. So you do make money, and you're able to get ads run on your show, which at the end you get a report, and your report tells you, here are the brands that advertise, here's your payout, and you still get listens, because let's say you showed up on this platform and you have 100 episodes, now you have 100 slots. So it really depends on where you start and what you want to do with your business. That's going to take that next step into you getting those ads run on your show. You don't choose which brands, run on your show, but if you're able to decide and say, here are the collection of brands that I want to show up consistently, then anytime they have a slot, they'll run. Because think about it as well. These brands, they're running ads at their own terms. Some brands are running ads today. Some brands may be running ads during Valentine's. Some brands may be running ads during Easter. So they all have budgets for different quarters. But if you have an open slot for them and they can fill the slot in with their advertisement and it resonates with your connections and it resonates with your audience, then you're definitely going to be, going over and beyond really for them, because you're able to also connect to them at a deeper level. So that really helps as well. So, Bo, I don't know if you wanted to say something, as I saw you raise your hand, but if that was a mistake, I understand. But yeah, feel free to join me. And, if you have any questions after this, I would love to hear. But that was very good, because I don't get to talk about this much, but this is a reality when I see them, releasing all these things. Because yeah, you can make thousands of dollars passively. That may be a reason why someone wants to make podcast shows. But you have to think about the exchange. What are you exchanging here? You're exchanging time for money. So if I spend 24 hours a month, that means I spent 1 hour for the next 24 days giving you information that would still last me 24 months out. So if somebody's listening to me 2 years from now, and what I said last year around the same time is resonating, then because they're listening to that episode and a commercial is running on that specific episode, I'm still getting a percentage from there. And the advertiser is still having an opportunity to connect to the person that's listening. So these are opportunities that are very open and they're very accessible. The difference is how much time are you putting in to connect to people who are going to listen to you consistently. Because I've seen people who have started podcasts for a year, for 2 years, for 3 years, for 4 years, and they keep going. And they're doing so well because now people are listening to them. People are finding them online. For me specifically, when I run an episode on my podcast, I always go to LinkedIn. I always tell people, go to my LinkedIn, because that's where we can have a professional connection and connect and really talk about stuff. I'm not going to send you to TikTok. I won't send you to Instagram. I could send you there, but you're just going to be there for a few minutes and leave. But if you really want to have a conversation and talk about something that is of interest to you, then LinkedIn will be the best place. And I always put it on every episode, so that if you listen to me at any time, you can listen in. I get people listening to me from Poland. There are 155 countries. So there are so many places I see on LinkedIn. Oh, you live here. Or I connect with this person from Hawaii. Or somebody else is in Mexico. Somebody else is in, a completely different country. And you're like, wow, how did you find me? Oh, I listened to this, or I was searching for this and I found this. I met somebody last week all the way in India, and I asked him, how did you find me? Because I always have something called virtual coffee. So if you want to have a virtual coffee with me, we can talk. And he wanted to just, have some conversation about something specific. And he said, hey, I was looking for podcast topics about SEO, and I found your show. And that's how I found you on LinkedIn. And I followed you and I connected, and now we're here on Zoom. I mean, the opportunities are endless. because you can really think about where people are going and what they want, and they connect with you. And that's a big deal. Welcome, Tony C and Jennifer. So it's big. It's really big to really think about this and ask yourself as a business, where do you want to show up? Because I've given you all this research, right? From A to C. You're able to see and decide, where do you want to be? By the end of the day, the goal is going to still remain, who are the people that are going to resonate back with you, right? I love to do research, and that's why I'm doing this with you, because I want to show you better than I can tell you. Because when I give you these links and I show you that, okay, if you can do it like this and spread your time like this, you can accomplish a lot of things. You can accomplish a lot of things. When I look at my podcast, if I calculate the amount of time it will take you 21 days, 22 hours, 41 minutes, and 48 seconds to complete 637 episodes on my show that I started from 2019 through December 6th. That was the last episode release. 21 days. That's how long it will take you to listen through back to back without stopping, right? Now, when you think about that, that's a lot of time. 21 days, that's a lot of time. So when you calculate that in hours, what does 21 days look like in hours, right? Those are the number of hours you have invested into an algorithm that can pick up any time. There was a time, I think it was in September this year, Brazil just came from nowhere. Boom. Shout out to Brazil. They started listening to the podcast and they still listen. And thank you for listening too. And what I realize is when they listen, there's specific topics that show up and I'm like, okay, I see why you're looking for this, looking for this, looking for this. For example, which was actually a very big shock to me, the podcast episode that was the most surprising this year, that had the most engagement, is the podcast episode I talked about Spotify interlinking, which for me was like off a whim. I was like, hey guys, check this out. That's the last thing I was ever thinking that would show up as a first top pick, but that's a topic of interest. So that tells me people want to do better with interlinking. In other words, if I tell you to listen to this podcast episode or this audiobook or this music playlist, and I want to have a gym playlist or a room playlist or a party playlist, whatever kind of playlist it is, you're going to put those playlists and put them in a sequence, right? If you're a DJ, you're going to sequence them based on interest, right? Based on timing. Okay, we know that in an hour, this place is going to fill up by 25%. You can do all the math. You can. At the end of the day, the goal is to now know how are you going to build this and actually translate that into a position that your business can actually even take flight when it now comes to getting access to so much information on the podcast that you're using based on the platform that you're extending your connections from. So if you're creating content on a podcast, yes, you can start by all means with any platform, but answer the question on, are they IAB compliant, right? Are they Interactive Advertising Bureau compliant? If they are, that's great. If you want to monetize, if you want to migrate, that's fine too. That's what I did. I moved from Spotify and I moved over. So when you now think about this, welcome Stack, good to have you here. And Chandra as well, I see you, Pete. When you look at all these different platforms and all these different opportunities, there's so many things that you can derive from one thing, conversation, right? If I put a message in a bottle and this is supposed to be a bottle you're supposed to receive, but you don't receive it, was a message received? I don't think so. But if you put a message in a bottle and it goes to the right person who's supposed to open the bottle and read the message, that message was received and it was delivered and it was opened and it was clicked, right? For today's time, of course, clicking is where we go to with email marketing. But if somebody opened that email and read that text, that means they were reading what your thoughts were saying to them. Technically, when I send you a text message or a voice message or FaceTime or whatever it is, you're going to feel a response or get a response from what I said or from what you said based on how you said it, right? So when you're putting all these sayings into your podcast and you're building it for the purpose of connecting with people, you don't know what people are going to listen to or what they want. For me right now, I'm seeing a lot of Pinterest. I'm seeing a lot of SEO. I'm seeing a lot of building when it comes to, personal branding. I'm seeing a lot of linking. I'm seeing a lot of intellectual property, asset acquisition. These are things that people want to learn about. How do you trademark your podcast? How do you create experiences for people to learn more? How do you do things with more capacity, with more in mind? So these are the things that you have to think about for yourself as a business and say, if I'm going to start a podcast, how well am I going to sustain this podcast? I'll give you some stats that will really shock you, but I hope this also motivates you too. When you go to podmatch.com/report, I put the link in the chat, you will see it. I mentioned earlier, on average, it takes 2 years and 100 episodes released before podcasters start seeing results. Can you wait for 2 years and 100 podcast episodes? That's technically 52 weeks times 2. That's 100 episodes, at least, plus minus. So can you spend 2 years without gaining any currency, but you have built trust? What's more valuable, currency or trust? That's for you to decide. They are both valuable, yes, but which one is going to have a higher purchasing power, or which one's going to have a higher trust score? That's going to be dependent on you and how you're able to connect with people. So approximately 1,174 podcasters quit every single day. That is sad, because when you hit 8 episodes, the chance of reaching that milestone is 45.38%. Hitting 50 episodes is 12.64%. Hitting 100 episodes is 6.01%. 200 episodes is 2.72%. 300 episodes is 2.52%. Are you noticing something? The more they are increasing in hundreds, the chance of reaching the milestone gets slimmer. So from 45% of 8 episodes to 300 episodes at 2.52%, and at 200 episodes at 2.72%, that gives you a very small range, right? So that tells you if it was 400%, if you're doing the math, that would still be between a 2.4 to, let's say, a 1.9% range. And then you do the math again as you keep going. By the time you hit 500 episodes, you're hitting that 1%. Then at that point, you're like, okay, if I'm in the top 1%, or if I'm in the top point something percent, how many downloads am I getting in a week? And the downloads in a week doesn't mean downloads that you published previously. It means downloads that were actively published in that week. So if you don't publish episodes that week, you can put episodes and build those episodes consistently, right? And those episodes in itself will be able to give you a much better response over time. Because when you think about all the things that you're creating for your business based on topics of interest, someone's going to book a call with you because of something you talked about. They're not going to book a call with you because you smell nice. Yeah, you should, but that's not going to make or break the conversation based on what they actually came for in the first place. So the intention has to be communicated, right? And you have to build it in a way that allows people to connect back with you. So if 1,174 podcasters quit every single day in a year, the math is 428,510 podcasters quit every single year. That's less than 500,000 people that quit on their dreams every single year. Just imagine, God has given you life. You have 52 weeks in a year. You can definitely spend 52 hours out of 52 weeks in a year and drop something at least 1 hour every week. But of course, life be lifing. There's always going to be something in the way, right? Always going to be something in the way. But you have to make that intention and say, hey, this right here is right now. You have to do it in a way that's going to let somebody understand that you're serious. And you have to do it and also show people that, hey, this is what I'm intending to do. And I'll show up for this reason because I want to help you understand a concept. Podcasting is personal. It's professional. It's a place that people can actually learn more about you. And that's a really good place to connect with people. For me, I've always said, hey, my podcast, I know one day, God willing, my grandkids My kids will be able to listen to my voice. Imagine if you could listen to your great grandfather's voice or your great grandmother's voice or your great 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 family member, and you're connecting with them on that kind of level. That's a personal thing, right? Just with music, with movies, it's the same thing, same difference. It's just that it's on an audio device. So if you're able to show the same intention and show up every time and give people what they're asking for based on what they want, then you can give them what they need after you give them what they want. When you go to the store, you're going there because you want to get eggs. You want to buy this. You want to buy that. You want to do this. You want to do that. The want is the now. It's the active moment. The need, you can prolong that need. You can plan for that need. You can, save for that need. You can invest for that need. So when you start thinking about the want and the need and the now and the then, you can start deciding how you can create an experience for yourself, because you have a lot to say. These less than 500,000 people are not podcasting today because they thought, thank you, Bo. Thank you so much. I appreciate you for being here. And that was a really good question too. When all these people are all connecting back to you, they're all connecting back because there's something that you keep saying that keeps them coming back to you. So when you're building a podcast, right, which podcast platform is best? I don't know. You know the answer, because what I may think is best to me may be different from what's best to you. That's a very subjective and positive probability. By the end of the day, it's for you to decide, where do you want to show up on, where you want to show up as, who do you want to show up as, and how frequently do you want to show up on those platforms, right? There are many platforms I've talked about today, right? When you come to enterprise, there's Red Circle, right? There's Megaphone, which a lot of your favorite podcasters are on, right? There are different platforms like that. There's Art19. There are places that you can create and build relationships with people, because these are platforms that you can actually show up on. So they're accessible. It's just up to you to decide, where do you want to be and how do you want to be on these platforms? Do you want to monetize? Do you want to create conversations? Do you want to establish connections? And also keep in mind, by the way, I didn't say this, and I'm going to leave this for last, which is really good because I think this will also help, put a ribbon on it. When you choose these platforms, just like you choose a website theme for your Shopify store, right? Just giving you a quick analogy. When you start creating your podcast hosting platform and decide where you want to be on, consider, please do this, because go to listennotes.com/stats, listen notes with 2 N, listennotes.com/stats, and look at the stats there and scroll all the way down to the bottom. You're going to see all the podcast distribution hosting platforms, hosting, not listening, hosting, that you can host your podcast on. They're all there, right? Now, why I'm giving you this link and why I'm giving you this information is so that when you make that information on that decision, you know exactly why you're doing it, because it has to be a factor in place for something called DA, which is domain authority, right? If you submit your podcast to a website that doesn't have a strong domain authority, then that's going to be a problem. I'll give you a very hypothetical example. I just thought about something I want to say to you. When you look at LinkedIn, right? LinkedIn is a great resource for professional networking. Now, imagine if there was something called LinkedIn. I just made this up. Let's say something called LinkedIn. It's the same as LinkedIn, but it's not really LinkedIn, right? Now you're like, is this really LinkedIn, right? You can submit your posts, you can build your network, you can grow your community. That's the same difference. I mean, what's the difference between these two platforms? What you're going to consider at that point is not the platform itself. It's going to be the credibility, and it's going to be the branding, and it's going to be the lifetime value, right? So if you don't know what LinkedIn is, you're going to rather go on LinkedIn, because LinkedIn is where you know that connections are built, professional network is established. And also, they've been there for years, which also means they have a domain, and that domain has an activity rate for a certain number of years over year. So if you think about a domain that has been there for years, for example, TikTok. I know I was on TikTok in 2016 when it was Musical.ly, but when I looked at their stats, when you go to host.io, you can go to different websites and check this out too. When you look at LinkedIn, That's a domain on its own that has about 97 domain authority, which is great, right? That's why people will want to go there, because with a great domain authority, it means you have great backing, you have great branding. If you say, hey, check me out on LinkedIn, you feel good. You're like, hey, let's connect there. And that conversation is going to be very professional. You're going to feel that energy. But if I say, hey, let's connect on LinkedIn, you're going to look at me like, what did you say? Where is that? The conversation is going to just slide left or exit left. You don't want to have that. You want to have a conversation that is showing shared affinity, shared trust, shared demand, and shared interest. So that's why I'm saying when you go to these platforms, choose the platform that you want to host your podcast on based on their credibility, based on their service, based on their technical setup, based on their SEO, based on their DA, their domain authority. You can go to Ahrefs and Google that, Ahrefs. Go to Ahrefs and type in Ahrefs website checker, or let me keep it that way, website checker. And you're going to get a tool. Copy that tool of that RSS feed platform, get their website, because every RSS feed is attached to a website. Get that website and check their DA. If that DA is low, then you already know that your reach is also going to be as limited as their DA is. So it's going to be very factual. I know this is a lot of information, but I want to make sure that you're aware of this so that when you're ever thinking about which platform is best, because the keyword here is best, right? What does best mean to you? For me, best could mean price. For me, best could mean technical. For me, best could mean customer service. So your best is different from my best. But when you take all these things to test and plan and say, this is what I want to do with my podcast, and now you know exactly which platform is the best suitable one for you, then you can now decide to say, okay, I'm going to stick to this platform. And you don't move platforms. People don't move platforms. It takes about 5 to 10 years for someone to move. So when you choose a platform, you stick to it. Just like when you buy a house, you have that house for 30 years or less, depending on how well you're able to do it or whatever you want to do. When you have a car, that's 3 to 5 years, depending on how long you have it. So you have an extended life plan. You have a life cycle. You have something that's going to determine something. You have a depreciation value. You have an asset value. So when you have all this lifetime value, what is a value exchange? That's really going to be the question that you have to answer. I can't answer that for you. I'm just giving you the research. I'm just giving you the links. I'm giving you the information. And then you decide what you want to do with your podcast. But your podcast is your voice and your truth. And you need to also know that people are listening to you, and you want people to listen to you on platforms that they can trust too, that they already even be on, that you can be on with them. So it's very important to look at these things and also consider it majorly. So if you think about a podcast the next time and you want to know which podcast platform is best, first question you have to ask yourself is it free or paid? Secondly, is it IAB certified or not? Third, am I able to connect my RSS feed and submit it to different platforms that are also IAB certified? Because if they're not, it's going to be hard, because some platforms don't allow you to do that. If you have a platform that is restrictive, then there's some websites that, because you're on a platform or hosting that is not IAB certified, you may not get the full benefits of the third-party platform you're trying to apply for. So you don't want to hit no snags. That's why I'm saying this now, so that when you're choosing these platforms, choose wisely and choose sparingly. So when you're able to know, okay, yes, no, do your conditional logics, get to know exactly what you're looking for, then you can now start to create these experiences for yourself and also for your listeners, because podcasting is a lifestyle, right? It's something that you do consistently. If you haven't been online for a while and you show up, you're like, hey, what's up? I'm back. Guess who's back? Right? Back again, right? You can talk about these things and connect with people, but you have to do it in a way that also shows that you care about their time, right? You also care about the cadence. You care about the information, right? When you think about your podcast should be an extension of your business if you're doing it for business. Some people are doing it for therapy. Some people are doing it for leisure. So it's really up to you to decide how you want to structure your business with a podcast. A podcast could be your sounding board. It could be your retainer program. It could be your tutorial. It could be your training ground, right? For anything that you're going to do for your business. Because guess what? Your podcast is technically SEO. In other words, if your show shows up on Apple and now someone goes to ChatGPT and is looking for topics about an episode you released a year ago or yesterday, or even in the next few minutes or hours from now, one day that episode will be seen and someone can click on Apple and find your show and then find your links. And if your links have LinkedIn there, it has your cards, it has your website, that's a discovery card for you. So people say, hey, I found you on ChatGPT. How? Oh, I was searching for this and I found these results and this resonated with me. Why? Because this is what you talked about and this is what I'm looking for. That's an exact match. And that's what you want. Not every time, which we wish for, but more often than not, you want to have these things happening most times for your business. So when you look at everything that I've said today and you just reflect back on where you want to show up as a business, where you want to show up as a podcast, where you want to show up as an intentional person that wants to give value and exchange that value with their time, then being intentional with where you want to host is important. And then where you want people to listen to is important. So when you go to these websites and you submit your RSS feed to these platforms, just know that one day people are going to use these platforms to search for something. And the day that they find you, they want to find you consistent, which will be a big deal, because if they find you and your last episode was 2022, then they found you, but they couldn't connect because it looks like you're not available for them. And if someone doesn't have time for you, it will show. You don't have to be told, you will see it. But if somebody has time for you, meaning that they're investing time in you because they know that you're going to listen to this at some point in your day, then that is an investment that you're putting into practice, because when someone's going to listen to that episode, they're going to learn something new. And because you gave that value first, they're going to trust you first. It's like an elephant. When you think about an elephant that has a really great memory, and one of the top, I would say one of the best memories, is an elephant. And if you did something for that elephant and you went back there 10 years later, that elephant will remember when you took a nail or a thorn out of the hoof, right? So when you start thinking about those little things, it goes a long way. If you help somebody with something specific and you're like, oh yeah, you helped me with this 10 years ago, they're going to remember that because you were intentional then and you're still intentional now. So if somebody comes to you and needs something and they don't get it right away, that's for them to decide. That's not for you to decide, right? Everyone is on their own journey, but you want to be ready when they're ready, right? That's why people say you ain't got to get ready. You got to stay ready. So you ain't got to get ready. So you start thinking about all these things and you start realizing that, oh, okay, if I just consistently show up and answer questions people frequently ask my business, then the answers I give them will be more than the questions they ask, which will allow me to have a higher leverage, a higher level of equity, and I'm able to have a higher balance because I have a higher trust score. So if somebody gives you something and shows you hospitality and shows you so many good things in advance before you even experience it, you're going to feel like, wow, this person actually cares for me. They're doing all these things for me. I got food, I got shelter, I'm good, I'm straight, and I'm able to do all these things and do them well. You're going to think about that person and thank God for them because they came through your path and you're able to enjoy what you're enjoying because of them. So when you take that same instance and apply that to your show and you say that, hey, I have a website, I have a business, I have a podcast, I have a product, and I want you to learn about this, you'll be talking to that person like you're talking to them right now. And when they listen to this, they'll be like, that's what I would have asked you if I met you or if I saw you. But now that you've answered the question, now I have another question. Now the question gets deeper, more sophisticated, and more interconnected to the result. And the more questions you answer, the more you get better at responding, which allows you to also become personable and also helpful and resourceful to the person that's asking these questions. So one big thing I will say, especially when it comes to podcast listening and podcast platforms, is that when you achieve the first thing I mentioned, podcast hosting is great with SEO, and now you submit that great hosting platform to great third-party applications or third-party sites or third-party softwares or third-party listening platforms, then you can create a loop and an effect for your business to thrive and successfully show up on different parts of the web, because everywhere right now has a lot of traffic, right? ChatGPT has their own web browser called Atlas. Perplexity has their own web browser. It's called Comet, right? Gemini, they're going to come up with theirs very soon. There's something called WebGuide right now for Google. So all these things are going to keep on happening and keep on building, but you have to also think about where you're growing as a business and what you're doing for your business, where all these podcast platforms are going to be showing up as. So if you do your research and you want to learn more about this is the best time to really pick this up. But I wanted to make sure I can give you this information so you can know which platform is best, how you can test, and how you can know exactly what you need to know to make the next move for your business in 2026. So with that said, if you have any questions, please put it in the chat. I'd love to hear from you. If you don't have any questions, all hearts and minds are clear, then we can definitely take this away. But thank you, Austin, Pete, Tony, C, thank you for being here, Isaac and Emmy. Thank you all for being here, and everyone as well as listening that came in, that was able to listen and will listen to this towards the end. Thank you for listening. I hope this helped you and gave you more insights about your business so that you can also be able to do this for yourself and learn this along the way. And if you need any help with business or tips or insights, go to playinc.online. That's playinc.online, or you can just click the links in the description and you can click where you can get insights. And right now it's at the top of the room. So if you need digital insights, whether it's marketing, whether it's advertising, whatever it is, whether it's website development, whether it's auditing, and you need digital marketing insights and SEO services, sign up, click the link above. You will be able to get access to the emails, and I send them out in a very, very good sequence so that you can be able to learn more about what you can do with the information you get, and then make a decision on what you want for your business. Because the way I'm learning is the way you're learning. The way I'm researching is the way you're researching. I'm just making sure that my research comes to you so you don't have to research the same thing I've done, so you can be 10 times faster than your competitors, because there's so much that happens within a short span of time. So I hope this helped you and gave you more insights. And if you have a ticket, go to the top. It says Marketing Club. We have over 352.6K members in this house. So you're welcome, you're welcome, you're welcome. And I look forward to being here with you and having more rooms like this. So thank you all for listening. I hope you have a blessed Tuesday. It's Taco Tuesday. So I hope you enjoy yourself and take care. Be safe out there. Stay warm for those who are in cold areas, and stay hydrated and stay blessed. I look forward to seeing you guys very soon. God bless you and enjoy your day. I'll see you in the next episode. Now, that was an episode, right? Thank you so much for listening to the We Don't Play podcast show. I'm so glad that you're here and you are sticking tight with us, especially to the very end. Now, this is season 11 and we're going to do it differently. And I want to make sure that every episode you listen to has something to give back so that you can also learn more after you listen. Now, We Don't Play podcast show is where you listen, you live, you learn, and you earn. So if you're in any of those positions out of those four, please make sure that you reach out to me. Send out an email through info@playinc.online. That's info@playinc.online. Or you could go to playinc.online, which is a website, www.playinc.online, playinc.online, and schedule a call so that we can get you on an SEO discovery call to talk about your business and help you with your marketing needs. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope this helped you. See you in the next episode. God bless you. Jesus loves you. Bye.